Good afternoon. My name is Ryan McPherson. I'm a first-year student here at MIT Sloan. I'm also the student lead for our panel this evening, Modern NBA Coaching, Balancing Team and Talent. With me on stage, we've got a great group of guys. We're going to have a great discussion, so we're glad that you're here to join us. On my right, Vinny Del Negro, former NBA head coach. To his right, Mike Brown, former NBA head coach. To his right, Scott Brooks, former NBA head coach. And to the right, Matt McNair? Oh, Mate McNair, excuse me.
Future NBA head coach.
Future NBA head coach and current VP of the basketball operations for the Houston Rockets. This panel is going to be moderated by none other than Mr. Brian Scalabrine, 2008 NBA champion. And with that, I'll pass it.
All right, it's on me now?
No, I got you. This panel will last 45 minutes. We'll save 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you have any questions, please post them via Twitter using the hashtag ModernNBACoach. And I'll funnel them up to you, Scal, and we'll go from there. Sound good?
Great.
Take it from here.
All right, so we talked about this is going to be, there will be a lot of analytics involved in here. And Monty, at the end, that's his area of expertise. And there'll be some questions that he'll ask about coaching an NBA superstar and how to do it, you know, with all that knowledge out there. So we'll just go and clearly at MIT, they don't work on creative writing. Vinny Del Negro, great coach, coached the Clippers, the Bulls. Mike Brown went to the finals. He back-to-back 60-win season. Scott Brooks, finals appearance, wins 70% of his games. Let's go. Okay, I'm just kidding. All right, so Mike, you're in the middle and you're in the hot seat, and you coach LeBron James, who's exactly. Okay. So you get the job. Obviously, so you're in San Antonio. You see Popovich and how he's ran with Tim Duncan and the superstars. Go to Indiana. Now you're coaching a young superstar, the chosen one, as he labels himself. And the expectations of going in.
Brian said that.
No, LeBron said that.
Okay.
LeBron said that.
Okay.
Right away, you have this young superstar. Clearly, anytime you have a talented player like that, the expectation is going to be high. How did you approach as soon as you got there?
Well, the biggest thing, I wanted to get to know him for who he was. And so I wanted to be in his environment away from the basketball court. So I spent a lot of time with him at his house, during barbecues, hanging out, watching TV, watching playoff games, so on and so forth when I first got there, just so I can get to know him a little bit as a person. And then from there, the one thing that I picked up on was he's extremely intelligent. It seems like, you know, people look at these guys and they're like, oh, Kobe's a great player, LeBron's a great player, Tim Duncan's a great player. They are superstars, but what is not mentioned is how intelligent they are. You know, I never coached Kevin Garnett, but I always felt that he was a very intelligent player. And so from that aspect, you lean on them a little bit to give input about the situation, and you take that and you kind of do what you need to do to help the team win at a high level. And this gives them what most NBA players and superstars want, as a little bit of ownership in the process. And once they have that, it's easy to run from there.
So LeBron, he is a basketball savant and it's well documented. But Vinny, you have Derrick Rose, who's, is it rookie year? Or?
Yeah, rookie year.
And you know, a #1 draft pick, phenomenal athlete. But there's a lot that you have to teach him about the game of basketball.
Well, first you have to understand the personality, like Mike said. I think you have to build trust and keep these guys accountable, but more importantly, build that trust with them. And with Derrick, he was a young player, and I think the point guard position is the hardest because you're having to be the quarterback out there, but you're also, Derrick has kind of a quiet demeanor a little bit. So getting to know him and what he was comfortable with, and what you realize with young players is that some young players you can give 3 or 4 things to in practice and they can handle it. Some guys, they just need 1 or 2 and they can get better. And your job as a head coach is obviously to improve him individually, so collectively we're stronger. But Derrick's a hard worker. It's unfortunate with the injuries he's had, but early on it was about watching film with him, talking to him. What is he comfortable with offensively? Does he understand our rotations defensively? And how can he be a leader on the court so the rest of the guys see that? Because what you're trying to do with all these great players we've coached is you have to keep them accountable as well. Yeah. You have to make them accountable because the head coach And the best players on your team, they cannot have bad practices. They have to be involved in film sessions, involved with their work ethic. I was fortunate. I played with 8 Hall of Famers in my career. They go about it in different ways, and as a head coach, you take some of those experience like Mike did with Tim Duncan in San Antonio, or Scott played with great players in his pro career. You learn from that, and you try to incorporate some of those things with the personality of that player.
Now, Scott, I want to talk about that first year you took over in Seattle, and you have a young Kevin Durant, and you're taking over 20 games into the season. Did you have any expectations going in that year? Was it all about the long-term growth of these guys, or was it about winning that game?
Well, first of all, I'm out of a job right now. Do I get to use this as put on my resume?
Yeah. With an unbelievable winning percentage,
to get
by the way.
MIT. When we took over, we were 1-12. So our focus was not really just in the process. I think as a coach, you want to win games, but what you really need to do is put yourself in the best position to work and create an environment that the players enjoy working in. Kevin was 19, 20 years old. Russell was 19, 20 years old at the time. We weren't focused on, wins and losses, but we were focused on coming in, doing our job every day, focusing on that. And what helped me, because when I took over, we were 1-12. My first 13 games, we were 1-12. But after that, what really helped me during that tough time was I saw those guys come into work every day. They didn't get depressed and feel sorry for themselves, but we're really focused on improving basketball players at that time. We were young, and you know what? 3 or 4 years later, we were still going to be young. Mm-hmm. So we never used age as an excuse. That's an easy cop-out. We all signed up to be a coach or a player in this league. You don't look at, once you get drafted, you're an NBA player, you're with an NBA team. You have to focus on being that. And being a pro just is not just focusing on in practice. You got to do it all, off the court, nutrition, on the court, film room. It takes everything to get better.
Now, you have young guys. Did those guys earn their minutes? Did you have other veterans that could have played over them, maybe deserving of more minutes, but you cannot make up a Kevin Durant, a 7-footer who can handle and shoot, Russell Westbrook, freak athlete, unbelievable motor. Maybe these guys, the future was them, but how do you hold and keep everyone accountable along the way?
Well, fortunately for me, Kevin and Russell, they were one of our best players at that age. We didn't have a lot of good players, good, but not, starters or stars in the league. But what we did have, we had players that were coming in every day and doing work. With Russell and Kevin, they enjoyed competing. And I would use those two guys against each other in practice because their competitive spirit was extremely high. You didn't want to put those guys on the same team all the time because, you wanted them to get better with each other and also against each other because that can improve the group.
Now, Mike, I think your second season, you go to the finals with Cleveland. Yeah. Okay, and you're going against San Antonio, someone that you obviously have a lot of experience with San Antonio, some familiarity with them, but the finals didn't go well for you. Right. Was that a sort of a benchmark for you to say, like, okay, the Spurs way is how it's done? The way that Tim Duncan, Manu, Pop, the way that they do it, we need to build that same culture here, and then you have to try to intertwine that with LeBron James?
You never can, in my opinion, duplicate what anybody does. And that's kind of one of the things, in my opinion, that's wrong with the NBA because not everybody has the same players. Not everybody has the same culture. And so what you have to do is you got to take a little bit from this team or a little bit from that team, a little bit from this experience or that experience and try to build your own culture within the organization that you're with. And, we weren't a young team necessarily. LeBron was, but we weren't necessarily a young team age-wise. We had some older veterans on the team, but they had never really won at a high level. And I thought for us, that was the biggest thing. When we made it to the finals and we won the Eastern Conference championship, I could see the relief and the joy and the happiness on everybody's face, which was fine. We celebrated and had a good time, and then we got back to work. When I got worried is when we went to San Antonio, we landed, we had our first practice, and one of our guys on our medical staff, he was walking around with a video camera while we were stretching. And I'm like, the fuck is going, excuse me, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. I'm like, we're getting ready for a final series. Yeah. And so I go up to him and I say, what's the camera for? And he says, you know, there are 3 or 4 guys that told him to do this, to document this so they can make a little video at the end, which is all good and dandy, but we weren't necessarily in the right mind frame going there. It was almost for us, we got there, it's a relief, our job is done. And so for me, just going through the finals experience with that team, especially LeBron, with him being our best player in the future of the franchise, was a stepping stone, hopefully, for better things to come in the future after going through it and getting our head beat in like we did.
Was there a little disappointment when you lost to our Celtics a few times in the next 3 years? You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that.
No, well, I will. You know, the only thing is I keep trying to think back at that series.
I had to do it.
I keep trying to think back at that series, and I just don't remember when you played.
No, I didn't. No. In practice.
He's doing the asking of the questions. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah. Remember, I'm the moderator here.
Oh, yes, I know. Okay. I'm in trouble now.
You know, I played a mean LeBron in practice, and I got the team ready.
You had the LeBron jersey?
Yeah, they locked him up after that. I remember I had a good practice that week, you know? It's easy to play with a neon green light, by the way. That was good. It sounded like my podium speech. So now let's go to LA. Chris Paul, obviously another basketball savant that you're dealing with, high-level player, but you also have a young budding superstar in Blake Griffin. Okay. Now I want to sort of switch this into a little bit more of an analytics discussion. With these two superstars, let's look at offensively. You're figuring out a philosophy of how you want to win, what you want to use. Is there things that you can use from the stats or the analytics side that you broke into right away at when you got to LA and you have this great point guard and this budding superstar?
Absolutely. I mean, Chris was, and Chris is a very intelligent player, great basketball IQ, but I think the balance is we had some veteran players and we had a lot of young players, so balancing the time in film sessions and in practices and things to keep the veteran guys kind of interested and the young players learning and kind of combining that. So that's never easy, but the analytics part is, as a head coach, we don't have all day to look at it. So what I would do is I would put things together that the analytics department would put together of 4, 5, 6, 7 things, depending on what it was, to show Blake and to show Chris, but really show the team, these are areas we're really strong in, these are areas that we need to improve in, and we could build a practice schedule around that by using them a positive way, whether it was through how many minutes they're playing or their injuries or practice schedules or whatever. So, but the biggest thing is when you're dealing with these guys is they have to be accountable. The best players are. I'll tell you a quick story. I'm playing in San Antonio years ago, and obviously David Robinson is one of the best players and one of the best people. And we're playing the Philadelphia 76ers, and David's got 20-something points, 15 rebounds, and 5 blocks at the half. Jeez. At the half. So we're up by like 20 against Philadelphia, but we didn't execute the end of the half's timeout. We called the play. David actually messed up the play, was in the wrong spot. We're up by 20-something points. We come in the locker room, we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, and the head coach at the time just starts reaming into David. We're never going to be a championship team if you don't start executing out of the timeouts. You should have had 30 points at the half. You should have had 20 rebounds. You should have had 10 blocks. Don't be satisfied with that. And all of us are sitting there like, shit, I got like 9 points or something. I'm like, yes, sir, no, sir. Everybody stays in line. But you can't do that with all superstars. But David sat there and goes, yes. And I'll never forget it. Our backup center was sitting there afterwards, and we're going out, and he's sitting there with his head's like this, and I'm like, what's wrong? And he says, if Papa's yelling at David with those statistics, I'm never going to play. But that was the environment. You have to keep those guys. They have to see the bigger picture. Chris and Blake, they understand that. Blake was very young at the time, had to develop his game, but it's about the habits and the environment, and like Scott said and like Mike said, the culture that we need, because as head coaches, we have a vision of what we want to do and how we want to do it. Now we got to get everybody to buy into that, and it takes time to do that.
Scott, you have, I mean, I've never seen in my generation of playing a guy like Russell Westbrook. I mean, the way that he can just run up the floor.
He taught him all that.
I mean, that's good.
Phenomenal.
You should get credit for that, Scott.
Do you have to look at, when you look at Russell Westbrook and look at wearables and biometrics to see if this guy's wearing out, or how many minutes you can play him, or how many times can you run a high pick and roll with Russell Westbrook before he does wear out? Is there knowledge that you went out there and get to say, like, can this guy continue to do this for 10 plus years?
Well, obviously he's a dynamic athlete, just an incredible, aggressive player. The thing you love about him that he brings it every night. He's one of the few guys that you can look into an NBA roster and say, you know what, he could probably play back-to-back in the same day. He has that much energy. And with all the metrics and the wearables, and there's certain things that you don't need to know. The data doesn't need to support what you see. With Russell, you know that he's going to bring it every night. You don't need to know that he's going to be fatigued going in 4 and 5 nights. He's one of the few guys that can handle that. But analytics has been around forever. I was fortunate enough to play with Olajuwon in Houston. We won a championship. We have something in common. We won a championship and never really did much to get that championship. So in 19, and he can't argue that. I know that. Trust me. I was the originator in that role. So Olajuwon, I remember this one particular game. It was a tight game, and he was always demanding the ball on the left block. And back then, you were allowed to shoot on the left block because back then there are players that can score with their back to the basket. So he made, that is a jab, by the way. he made a point, you know what, keep the game simple. And I'm like, Akeem, I do. I give you the ball every time. He says, exactly. What happens is I score, or I get fouled, or you get an open three. So he knew that back then, but I had a good relationship with him, so I would throw my little jab back at him. I like that, but let's change the order. I get the three first, and you get the shots in the free throw line. But it's always been there. For some reason, lately we're having like this divide, and it's like, you guys.
Yeah.
Where do you guys come from? Like, you guys, the analytic guys. Or the analytics are saying, you guys, the coaches. No, we're all in this together. We have to figure out ways to win together, build our teams together, and do it together, and not worry about who gets the credit. What happens is egos get involved. The analytics want more attention. You know what? It's all important. It's all helping the players, and it's always about the players. When it's not about the players, that's when things go wrong.
I mean, you have to have, some guy had to have come to you at OKC and said, you're not doing this, and the numbers support it. At that point, do you sit down with him? Do you guys watch film together? I mean, what would be the next step? There's no way, I mean, maybe at OKC, the way you guys run it, but you can't always be on the same page with every office and coaches are coming together with.
No, you're never always on the same page, but you figure out what's best for the team. And then once you get on the court, we're all on the same page. Whether as I'm the head coach and assistant coach is telling me something, hey, I don't know, I agree that the next ex-coach says something, and then we start having a debate over what's best. But when we leave the room, it's always about the players. And we can never lose that. Because if you lose that, the players know that, and then all of a sudden, things don't go well for you.
Where's Thibodeau at? No, I'm just kidding.
But our job, like Scott said, is that we can get players to understand what their role in the team is. This is what I need you to do. Go do it every night to help the group win. But our job is to get them to accept their role, to understand how they can help us as a team of leaders. How can we get them to play at the highest level as a group? And that's what he's talking about, is how can we mesh that together and make sense of it all? And the analytics obviously help. Do they always work, and do they always tell the total story? No, but if you sit in a room and go through it with some of these people, they can help you in ways to devise a way to make it better.
Mike, so going back to LeBron, now he carries so much of the load offensively for you guys, whether it be run, pick, and roll. And how do you hold him accountable on the other end of the floor, on the defensive end, when he's doing so much for you throughout? Is it right in front of everybody to set an example in the back and to pull them aside? Or do you have to just understand that maybe a player can't run 60 pick and rolls for you and guard the best player and rebound the way that he does? I mean, is it kind of a balance you have to find?
Well, one of the things that I do with guys is if you have a player that carries a big offensive load for you, especially in the beginning of the game, I try not to put that guy on the opposing team's superstar. The last 3 to 4 minutes of a ball game, maybe I'll make the switch. And that was something working in San Antonio we used to do when we played against the Lakers. We never put Tim Duncan on Shaquille O'Neal to start the game. It was always somebody else's responsibility, and a lot of times it fell on Malik Rose. And Malik Rose is a 6'5" postman, but that was his job. That was the role that we gave him, and so he did a terrific job of that. And then we allowed Tim to switch on the Shaq the last 3 to 4 minutes of the game when the possessions were at a higher value. And so with LeBron, it was kind of the same thing. We obviously asked a lot of him on the offense end of the floor, but defensively, we had a system. And I think if you have a system in place that everybody understands, then you don't necessarily, as the head coach, always have to hold them accountable. They know when somebody missed an assignment. And when I first got the job in Cleveland, we struggled initially, but I don't know, after the first month and a half, I knew we were going to be okay because we were getting our ass kicked in the pick and roll. I can't remember who we were playing. And I called a timeout because we just gotten beat on the pick and roll again. And I went to the huddle, and I said, okay, what do you guys want to do? You want to drop? You want to switch? What do you want to do on the pick and roll? We're getting our ass kicked. And at that point in time, LeBron James, although he was young, he said, since I cursed already, I'm going to curse again. He said, fuck that. We're going to show. That's who we are. We are a show team. You're going to show, boom, 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 boom. And when this happens, you're going to do this and that, and everybody's on a string. And I just kind of sat back and I said, okay, now we have something. When you have your guys, especially your superstars, not just accept their roles or accept whatever situation they're in, but embrace it. Mm-hmm. And I felt at that particular moment in time, LeBron embraced what we were doing, and then it's a wrap. You're going to have a chance to be successful in this league.
Vinny, right now, a lot of talk about pace and space. Mm-hmm. Is this a fad? Is it a trend? Is it something that's going to change the game forever?
Well, the three-point shot has changed the game, and obviously Steph Curry is kind of making it almost unrealistic, some of the things he's doing. He makes it look like a video game sometimes. But, we want more possessions. But I think, it gets a little skewed because we all don't have the same personnel. Right. There's certain things that he needs to do for his team and Scott needs to do for his teams and I need to do for my teams that are going to be a little bit similar but a little bit different because of our personnel. You can't play like Golden State if you don't have that personnel and no one else does. They don't have that backcourt. They don't have the range in shooting. They don't have Steph Curry. But they also have a lot of very, very good players with them. So I think as a coach, you're building a system that fits your guys the best. And yes, everyone wants to play fast. But what people tend to forget is, as a player, playing fast is hard work. Yeah. You have to run. You have to get to the corner so you can space. And I want to play fast. They want to play fast because they want to get more shots. But how does that affect your transition defense? Is the right guys, is LeBron and KD and Chris Paul and Blake getting the ball in situations in key times that we're successful, or are they just track stars running up and down? You build the system around your personnel, but no question, the three-point shot, having spacers, the stretch fours opens up the court now. When I played, it was much more physical. Now, if you face up with a guy and he has any type of ball skills or can shoot, he's incredibly difficult to guard. That's why teams are playing 1 big and 4 smalls, or basically 5 smalls at times, and there's not those. Like if Olajuwon was playing and Charles Barkley and Patrick and David, those were post-up dominant guys. You had to get them the ball. Now the game is different. There's not a lot of those guys, so that has changed. Pace and space, we all want to play fast, but we want to play to our personnel.
Scott, I have a question. So you guys want to play fast. We talked about some of the wearables. We talked about LeBron defensively. So you want to play fast, you want your guys to play offense, defense, and you want your guys to play as much as possible, especially your star players. How do you balance that? How do you tell LeBron, I need you to play 40 minutes, I want you to play offense and defense, or do you tell him, I want you to focus on offense and here's the times you can rest? Or what are the things you're trying to tell your guys, especially your stars, to get the most out of them in the few minutes, that they do rest? What are you telling them to do there?
At least the way that I do it, and You know, the coaches that I've been with, Rick Carlisle, Bernie Bickerstaff, Greg Popovich, I'm more to the mindset that you can't tell your superstar to, hey, you could take a break defensively, or you could take a break here. If he's going to be on the floor, he's got to play. And if he's not capable of playing, then he's got to come sit down. And when you have superstars, i.e. Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Tim Duncan, those guys, not only are they elite players or guys that of extreme intelligence, but the competitive spirit nature that they have, when they're out on the floor, they're bringing it. They're not going to take a break on the defense end of the floor or take a break on the offense end of the floor because they want to win that bad. And when they lose, it hurts. And so to have those types of players on your team, you know, that's infectious, you know, for everybody. And so you don't tell those guys anything special like that. You tell them you go bust your behind and you do what you're supposed to do on both ends of the floor, and we'll have a chance to win. And everybody will follow.
It's pro basketball. I mean, the guys are getting paid to play. So as coaches, you know, we shouldn't have to coach attitude. We shouldn't have to coach effort. Do we have to sometimes? Yes. But if our star players, we've been very fortunate. I mean, all of us would sit up here. I've had great players. Obviously, these guys have had great players. That changes the complexion of everything if they buy into that, like Mike said. And like Scott said earlier, I mean, it's all about that. But if you get your best players that have really good attitudes, that play hard, the other guys will filter into that, and you build that culture and that environment where it is demanding. And LeBron knows when he makes a mistake, or Chris does, or Blake. They know when they do. And when they really mature in the league, they understand, man, that wasn't good enough what I did just then. I got to do a better job. And they take it on themselves, and the other guys see that, like the story I said about David Robinson, and then the rest falls in place. The rest falls in place.
So, well, the minutes, that's like the hot topic right now.
Yeah.
You know, 30 minutes, 30, 45, or 40 minutes. But it's throughout the history of the game, the elite players play the most minutes.
Right.
And if that wasn't the case, it's not an equal opportunity league. I would have never only played 7 minutes. I would have had 24 minutes every night if it was equal, right? So what you have to think about, you have to use the data that you're getting through, you know, we had a sports scientist that I use quite frequently. What the data that you get, how do you keep your players on the court for 82 games and play elite level minutes? So in order to do that, but the fan base, the Twitter world doesn't get access to this, that you kept your minutes. We documented every minute, workload, heart rates. So we had that. We even had it on drills. So I know this drill produces this much of a workload. So if I want to have a ball busting practice, I can put together 4 or 5 tough drills that I know their heart rate's going to get up and they're going to get after it, and it's going to fatigue them. It's going to continue to present their best player, our best person on the court every night. So the minutes, if you look at just minutes, that only shows a little bit of the whole issue here.
So what are the things that you most are looking at? Are you looking at workload? Are you looking at what your trainers are giving you? Or put another way, what do you want more of if you're a coach? Do you want more of those workloads? Do you want somebody who's well-versed in trying to translate that practice load into a game load?
You want real data. You want something that's going to help yourself as a coach and your team. The fun stuff out there, you know, he runs 4.2 miles in a game. Russell Westbrook dribbled 16 times in a possession. Those are all great things to look at, but it doesn't really tell anything that you really need to know. All athletes are training every summer. It's a year-round sport. Back when I played, there was no nutritionist. We had a guy in New York when I played for the Knicks in the mid-'90s. And he had like this weird way of looking at things, but it really made a lot of sense. We all drank this protein shake, you know, all this fruit and protein in it and this and that. And he would always give me like the 12-ounce version. And it was good. I mean, I wanted it after every game, but he would give Oakley and Ewing the 16 or the 20-ounce. And he said, well, look at your size. You don't need what they need. So you kind of look at things different from that point. But you need stuff, but you need important stuff.
So here's another question. So you're trying to maximize minutes in a game for your players, but you're also trying to maximize for the playoffs. So how do you balance, like, what if your trainers are coming up to you and saying, Westbrook can handle 40 minutes a game tomorrow night, but he can't sustain that in the playoffs. But you need to win, you need to get that seed, you need to prepare yourself for the playoffs. So how do you balance resting him and trying to peak him later versus trying to win tomorrow night?
I mean, it's like these guys, it's managing the season. I mean, it might be Russell's played 4 games in 5 nights, or, at the end of the day, we want to win. We're all competitive. I mean, it's a win-loss situation for a coach. So if I have to play a guy another couple minutes and we can win the game, or maybe the next game he can get his minutes down because we're playing maybe a different opponent, obviously, that we should handle. But it varies. But at the end of the day, as a head coach, we're managing the season. How many shoot-arounds do we have? How many breakfast meetings do we have? And I've seen players where I've seen different MRIs and they have bone on bone in their knee and they never miss a practice, never miss a game. Then you'll see another guy that has a little bit of it that's hitting and he can't play at all and has to have surgery. I mean, so everybody's different what they can handle. A guy like Russell Westbrook, it never looks like he gets tired. I mean, he's I think, obviously the exception because he's so athletic, but we're monitoring that all the time. We have to protect our players, and all of our staffs are incredibly smart and experienced, and they're giving us all the data, and then we have a plan in place to make sure we protect the players, but also give our teams the best chance to win.
This is relatively new, right? I mean, wearables, all you guys coached early 2000s.
What's interesting is, like, when we played, it was a privilege to play 82 games. Like, guys, like superstar guys, like, I'm playing 82 games. Yeah. I'm not missing a practice. Like, but now it's like the analytics have helped dramatically. But at the end of the day, certain guys can handle certain things.
Spurs. Is Popovich changing the way this whole thing is going?
Yeah, he definitely is. And I tell you, when I was last in Cleveland, that's when the cameras started coming out and where they measure the workload. And I never really understood it. I knew the basics of it, and our medical staff was the one that communicated with me or what was going on. And one of the things, obviously, that I liked to do back then, and it changes now, but is in pick and roll situation, is attack the ball in an aggressive show. And the interesting part about it is, after a month into the season, they came to me and they said, hey, during the games, the 2 guys with the highest workload were Tristan Thompson and Anderson Varejao. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, shouldn't it be a guard? You'd think, shouldn't it be a guard that had the most workload because they're out on the perimeter, the rotations are longer, so on and so forth. And what came of it is when they jump out and they show in pick and roll situations, because that's the direction, obviously, that the game is. It's pick and roll after pick and roll after pick and roll, not just one pick and roll per possession. It's multiple pick and rolls per possession. So they're jumping out and they're showing. Well, after they show, and then they're recovering back, and then they got to do it again on the backside, they're covering a lot of ground in one possession. And so what you do is you try to be smart about it from the standpoint that, maybe their workload might not be as heavy the next day in practice. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be a minutes thing, because it can be a practice thing too, and not just the physicality of practice, but running around and doing different drills and then being there for 2 or 3 hours. Those things can wear on a body too. So I took that into consideration once I started understanding how they're able to measure the workload and when it made sense.
Would you ever think of adjusting your defensive style because of it?
I actually did to a certain degree. I didn't. We started going away from showing as much and started going to downing or icing or however you want to call it, and because it helped save those guys' legs throughout the course of the game. And not only that, just with the way that the game has transitioned, it was a lot better for us.
So Scott, everyone's now going smaller. If you could restart this whole thing, would you think about playing Durant more at the 4 than at the 3? Is that something? Is the whole league switching? Would that be a move that you can look back and say, like, well, this can really get us over the hump?
Well, what made us unique was you can play Durant basically at all 5 positions, and we did that. That's what made us, a really good team for a long period of time before we came up with the injury bug. But with Kevin, when you're changing what you do for one or two players, you have to make sure that it's going to work. And with Kevin, very talented, one of the nicest human beings on earth, but very competitive. And when you put him in a position, on any position on the floor, he's going to make it work. But you have to do what's best for the team, and you have to do what's best for the long haul of the team. If you put Kevin and he has to guard a big for 32 minutes for 82 games, all of a sudden Kevin becomes probably an average player because he has to bang every night against a guy that's probably 20 or 30 pounds heavier. So you have to be able to find that balance. And we were able to do that with Kevin. But it's important to do that. Nowadays, I think it's a lot easier nowadays because it seems like everybody is playing small. So now you're coming, is our small going to be better than your small? Mm-hmm. And with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, I feel pretty confident. And even now, even though they're in a little bit of a funk now, their small is better than any team's small.
Vinny, at the time you have Blake Griffin. He's playing 4 for you. You have DeAndre Jordan. Can you win now with a 4 who's not shooting threes, not a stretch 4, and a 5 who also doesn't stretch a 4? Two bigs who, I mean, you could say Blake Griffin can knock down a 15 to 17 footer.
Much better.
But do you need to have that stretch 4? Do you need Blake Griffin to play 5 for you to have success in today's day and age?
Well, I think he can now because he can shoot it better. But really, he's so effective when he's diving to the rim. So now that they have Jeff Green, they can play him at the 4. They can play a little bit smaller as long as they can control the glass. Because like we know, whether you have Kevin Durant or LeBron, you have so much flexibility. So with a guy like Blake Griffin, you can do that as well. So yes, I mean, the free throw issue, obviously, when I was coaching the Clippers with DJ and obviously with Blake, who were struggling, it was hard to play them a lot at the end together because of the foul issue. Mm-hmm. Now Blake's at a 70+. They can play Blake at the 5. But, is that better than what Golden State does when they play small? Or is it better to go big and try to kill them on the glass? You're obviously trying to take away the 3 as much as possible. So it really just depends. But Blake has so much versatility. He's good off the dribble. He can pass. Now he can shoot. He can make free throws. He's incredibly athletic. And he's really best when he's in a pick and roll with Chris and he's diving and now a 4-man is out there spacing it because now the court is wide open. You don't have great rim protection defensively, but you can switch a lot of things pick and roll. And if teams are going to beat you with the 2 and we're a very good 3-point shooting team, you play the percentages.
So if you look at those numbers, would you say, did you run Blake at the 5 and say, like, all right, we're going to go small because I need shooting because it's going to help our Chris Paul have more space to work?
Yeah, you always were trying to create space for Jamal Crawford or Chris Paul or whoever was out there. But at the end of the day, in the big moments, you want the ball in Chris Paul and Blake Griffin's hands. You want the ball in LeBron and KD and White. Those guys, that's what they are superstars for because they can take the game over at the biggest moments. So I think it's important to get everybody involved so everyone's on the same page. But in the key moments, we also know what's your role, what do you do well. Let's make sure we're running these sets the right way. Our job as coaches is to make sure the details are run the right way. The angles of the screen, the timing of the passes, are the rotations there? Why aren't they? Setting up practices. What's the film session like? What's our travel like? There's so much on sleep. What time are we getting in? Is it better to have a shoot around before, after, breakfast meeting? So we're managing the season that's best for our team, and then you're figuring out lineups through the analytics and through your coaches.
I think you can win either way. If you play with 2 bigs, you can win. Look at San Antonio. Look at the Lakers when they had Andrew Bynum and Pau Gasol. What it is, you'd like to have the flexibility of being able to play with a guy that can space at the 4 position. Sure. And both those 2 teams that I mentioned that started 2 traditional bigs and one at a very high level, they both had the flexibility of being able to play quote-unquote small. Lamar Odom, at the end of ball games for the Lakers, he was their power forward and Pau Gasol was their center. And so having that type of flexibility makes it tough on other teams because now they just don't have to prepare for one particular style of play. You're able to play different ways, and throughout the course of the game, that means your guys have to be able to guard different actions, different looks because of the different types of personnel on the floor. Same with San Antonio. For a while, it was Matt Bonner. Now it's Boris Diaw. And when you insert those guys in the game again, it triggers something defensively for your opponent that maybe you're not as prepared for because you don't see it all the time. So even back in the day, you think about the Denver Nuggets and Doug Moe. I mean, those guys played fast. They scored a ton of points. He doesn't get near the credit that he probably should get. And you got a guy like Alex English, who's not a traditional power forward, but playing power forward. He's a ball-skilled guy that can shoot, that can drive, and that can pass and do some other things. That's what made them so tough. So just having the flexibility of being able to play a different style of basketball throughout the course of a game, in my opinion, makes it hard on your opponent.
But, we always talk about San Antonio because we all have relationships there and playing and coaching and things, but people tend to forget the superstar players in San Antonio could have left in free agency and made more money, got longer-term deals. Manu, Tony, and Tim got tons of times leave. They always stayed there. They took less money to give them flexible. And what does San Antonio always have? They have depth. So they can manage the minutes better and still win basketball games because they've stayed together for so long. It's the first, second, third option. As you get to the playoffs, if I'm playing Mike or Scott's team, I have to take away their first option. But the Spurs can get to the second and third option like that because they've been together and they can manage the minutes because those superstar guys took less money to build that.
I mean, they still get guys like Patty Mills that every year it's a different guy. Chris Joseph last year that are stepping up.
Danny Green came in.
Yeah, So how are they able to do that, getting guys, Danny Green from the D League, and to have the impact that he had in the NBA Finals? What is it that the Spurs are doing? And I'm with all you guys. I think everyone here probably thinks that small ball starts with Golden State. I mean, you can go back to Phoenix when they had Nash. That was a spread pick and roll too. I mean, there's a lot of the small ball has been going along. Golden State happens to win all these games. But what is it about the Spurs that just insert a guy right away and the big three could sit out and they could still win games?
They're running some of the same play sets that I ran when I played there. It doesn't change. It's the next guy up. It's the character. David started it, obviously Tim, but look at a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge. He comes in. Most teams that get a superstar player, what do? They build a system around him. When LaMarcus Aldridge walked in the gym, I was there, third practice. They're like, LaMarcus, this is what we're doing. We're the Spurs. You're fitting into us. Yeah. You figure it out. And it took him a while to figure it out. And he was passing and he was turning it over. And we're like, they just went to him and said, hey, be LaMarcus Aldridge. If you're open, shoot it. If not, swing it. Play pick and roll. Play basketball. And now look what he's doing. So it depends on the system. And I think it's unfair a lot of times to compare to San Antonio. Golden State's smart. That's what they do. They have an explosive backcourt. They're playing to their strengths. They have Draymond Green, who is versatile as anybody. They have depth. They keep their flexibility. And now they don't have to kill these guys with minutes. A lot of them don't even play in the fourth quarter because they have such big leads. That's what we try to do as coaches when we have such great players. Hey, let's jump on them early so we can manage your minutes. If we can get your minutes down and control the game in the fourth, now we can get ready for the next game. So there's a huge process involved, but I think the Spurs, obviously, template is unfair at times because they've been doing it so long.
But Brian, a lot of times, especially with Golden State, what they're doing it's special.
Yeah.
And they're doing it so well that people think it's easy. Bob has put this team together, and they are it's amazing. But another thing that really gets to me, when I look at them, it's the three-point shooting, it's the attacks, it's the passing. But what makes them in San Antonio unique is their defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about the defense. It's hard to be a two-way team.
Balance.
They have 5 guys on both ends of the court that can make plays. Defensively, they can read. They can anticipate.
Switch.
They can switch. They understand their schemes. And able to do that, it looks so easy. The great teams make it look easy, but it's really difficult.
But, it's funny because, you have former players coming out and saying, I would do this against Steph Curry and I would do this. Well, trust me, there's a lot of really smart basketball coaches and a lot of analytics people and a lot of organizations that are trying to slow down Steph Curry. It's not that easy. Well, is Michael Jordan? They're different eras. There's different rules. It just changes. The game is different, and you have to adapt to that as much as possible. That's why we come to these things, or we talk, or we go to clinics or whatever, because you're always trying to improve because the game changes.
There was nobody back then shooting 35-footers with 18 seconds on the shot clock and making them. That was a shot with the end of the quarter at halftime.
3-on-1 in the fast break. Let's run to the three-point line. What were we taught? 2-on, you better get a layup. You know, boom. Guys are running to the three-point line. It's just different.
You like those shots? Transition threes?
Love them. Corners.
Depending on who's taking them.
So,
It's always on every play, like we have a little saying in our coaches' meetings, is this play going to work? And one of our assistants is, he wants to be the smart ass. He says, tell me who the O's and the X's are, and I'll tell you if the plays are going to work. But, I mean, what they do is incredible because they do it every night, and they stay with it every night. But the defense is phenomenal what they do defensively.
well, we saw, I don't know if you guys watched the game, but Houston last night, they all run to the three. They all shoot transition three. That's one of their philosophies. It doesn't matter if it's Corey Brewer shooting 29%. I mean, that's what they're going to live with, and that's their shot. I mean, I guess it's just the idea of you have to adapt and say, we're going to play this way. We're going to run to the three in transition. We're going to be okay with that, or we're not going to be okay with that.
But in saying that, the alignment from ownership to GM to coaches, what style of play fits your personnel? If you got guys shooting a bunch of threes out there, that's not your style, it's not going to work. So what do we
Don't you just sub them out?
Well, who are you putting in?
Somebody else that can, right?
What if you have nobody else that can do that at a high level? You know what I mean? So there, not every team is Golden State or some of the great players we've coached. So you got to manage that as well and have a system in place. And it takes time to do that, but you have to be aligned to be able to get that done.
And Brian, as much as we all do, is if you have a system in place and a culture within an organization that everybody embraces and believes in, you're going to have a good chance to win. You're going to have a good chance to win at a high level.
Do you have that superstar? So here at MIT, we get questions from the fans on an iPad. I would have had you guys raise your hand, but that's not how we're going to do it. You get a question, Monty.
Wow.
All right.
Let's go ahead. Hey,
I thought he was just here to hold my water.
let's go.
My water.
No, you guys are good. Hold on.
like
Monty,
Ben
you have 20 seconds to answer it. Ready? What are the challenges of getting NBA coaches to buy into using analytics? Has the sentiment changed over the years? 20 seconds, go.
I think for coaches, they've obviously, this is pretty new, the analytics movement. You guys obviously, played, and it wasn't a big part of basketball back then. But I think it's becoming more and more of, integrated. And I've seen with our coaches, we had Coach McHale last year and JB this year. And I think the initial kind of thrust to try to get them to buy in is tough. But once you get a few wins and they see that what you're doing helps them and works, it just makes it easier to keep going down that path. And I think the other thing is getting over the initial kind of us versus them mentality, which especially there was when I was upstairs and they're downstairs. So being around the coaches more, them knowing that we're on the same team, trying to do the same thing, allows them to at least get straight to the merits of what I'm trying to tell them instead of them trying to think, well, does he have some other agenda here? Is he trying to push? So those are the things I think.
All right, you're 20 seconds up.
Yeah, way too long.
Let's talk about coaching now.
Knowledge is power. Everyone, we're all trying to learn and make sense of it to help our team.
Anybody going into a game, offensively or defensively, would you ever just look? I know it's the answer to this, but would you ever look at the analytics and change a game plan?
No, I think you do what you do. Right. And that's how successful teams win. And, I've been obviously fortunate to be around a couple of successful teams. And the biggest thing that those coaches, again, from Rick Carlisle to Bernie Bickerstaff to Greg Popovich, that those coaches always did. They always did what they do. And they felt that from there, throughout the course of the game, if they needed to, they will make an adjustment or two. But if they worry more about themselves, especially during an 82-game season, than the opponent and or what analytics say.
I think, just real quick, I think the analytics, it depends on what it is, but certain things they're going to be more helpful on. So I don't think you're ever going to change your entire scheme or use just that. It's a tool, but for instance, a guy's three-point percentage is probably a little more useful from the analytics perspective, whereas something like how a team does against pick and roll coverage, I might be able to point. Actually, JB and I just had this conversation the other day. I said, there's nothing conclusive here, but here's what it leans, and here's some video to go watch. So it might point you in a direction on other things, but it's not going to change, big picture stuff.
All right,
It may give you ideas and give you something to support what you're trying to get across to the team at certain times, but I agree, it shouldn't make you change your whole scheme.
But as coaches, we all have our core values of what have to be done. We're not going to change the whole thing and change the mindset. The more the guys have to think, the slower their feet get. It's a reaction sport. You know what I mean? You have to understand your audience, and some guys can handle 2 or 3 or 4 things, like I said. Some guys can handle 5 or 6. Some guys can handle 1. So knowing that, building that core value that we have and what's best for the team, to me is the most important, because you got to clear the mind to free yourself up.
So that leads to this question: basketball IQ. If basketball IQ is about players making the best decisions, can it be taught? Could you get a guy with low IQ 3 years later, high IQ?
I think if you have a good culture and a good system and a good coaching staff, you can make them better. I also think there's also a knack of how you grew up playing, and I was talking to Bob earlier, like a Sean Livingston to me. Great kid, had a horrific injury, but when you watch him play, he knows how to play. Now, can you teach some of those skills? Probably, but a lot of them, it's an instinct game. You know what I mean? It's a reaction game. Can you help? What you're trying to do is the guys that don't have the basketball instinct, try not to put them in an area where they have to make those decisions. Put them in an area where they're at their strength. Stay away from those decisions and make sure Chris Paul or LeBron or some of these guys, the better players, let them do the basketball IQ. You go do your job.
Injuries. Is it just black and white? Superstar gets hurt, no matter what the scenario is. You're trying to get into the playoffs. It's the beginning of the season to play, in the playoffs. Do you treat a superstar injury the same way, no matter what?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, the role player is an important part of the team, whether he plays, in the rotation or he's just helping your team get better in practice. The players are important. And if the players don't feel that you don't feel that they are important, they're not going to play hard for you.
Right.
This is a relationship sport. You have to be able to engage, empower your players. And in able to do that, they have to know that you have their best interests. And if, just because the guy doesn't play, you don't care about his injury, I don't think one coach in the NBA does that.
It's like anything. We talk all the time to players. If you're hurt, you got to toughen up, play through it as best you can, as long as the trainer and doctor sign off. If you're injured, whether it's a surgery or rehab, we always have to protect the players. That's our job. I mean, that's a big part of it. We're always going to do what's best for the players. And like Scott said, and Mike touched upon earlier, it's about the players. And they have to feel that trust. It goes back and forth. We need things from them. They need things for us. You have to be flexible on some things. But we all have our core values as coaches that this has to get done this certain way. This is what we believe in. That doesn't mean we're not flexible to listen. But it doesn't mean we're going to implement everything that analytics say or another person says, because we're doing it 24/7. We know the whole schemes and the things we want to do for the environment better than anybody.
Minute restrictions are hard to deal with from a coach and from a player standpoint. We had that situation with Russell Westbrook when he came off the injury with his knee. But as a coach, you want to play, you want to win, you want to put your best team out there. As a player, try to get Russell off the court. It's hard. It's hard. 4-minute break is that's like a day off for him. So you have to understand that you have to be the adult in the relationship here. Yeah. You have to focus on, we're not really focused on this next possession. Russell, your minutes are this. We have to figure out what's the best way to utilize the 32 minutes in the game, whether we want to backload them or whatever. If there is an overtime, we had a situation, there is an overtime. So I had to not play him for the first 3 minutes of overtime. We ended up losing the game, but that wasn't important. What was important was Russell is going to be healthy the next day.
But when he's saying that, Russell's probably on the sideline saying, "Hey, coach, put me in. I'm good. He's driving him crazy.
He was looking like this. Looking at me. Okay, coach, I'm ready.
Let's go.
Same question to you, Monty.
Yeah, I mean, I think one big thing is trying to go into a game with a plan, and that, you're taking the long-term view. You've planned out this guy's minutes, and try not to get caught up in the emotion of the game, because, scaling back that guy's minutes now can keep him healthy for the playoffs. So.
All right, we got another one here. That was the front office one. You guys are lame on your questions, so I'm just going to continue to go. For all the people here, that's all you guys came up with, 6 questions? Let's see. You guys got any questions?
I got a question.
There we go. Finally, life preserver.
I'd like to ask Mike about.
Then we're on the same page.
No, but maybe talk a little bit about Kobe. You know, you've seen what he's going through this year. You know, but you had Kobe's not easy. You have to be on top of your game. He's going to ask you questions. Chris is the same way. What are we doing here? Why are we doing this? What's going on? And, you know, I mean, Kobe's the same way. He's on top of everything. What was it like coaching him and seeing what he's going through now as far as his health? Legendary career, we know, but coaching him is much different.
You know, that's part of what makes him great.
Right.
Is his competitive spirit, competitive nature. I don't know if there's anybody out there that is more competitive than him. And so watching him, I know it's tough because he wants to perform at the level that he's always performed at, but his body can't do it. The biggest thing, and I learned a lot from a lot of guys that I was around, but one of the biggest things we used to say when I was an assistant on the staff of San Antonio is whenever we came up with any sort of a game plan, we always said, hey, it's got to make sense to Tim. Because we felt like he was probably the smartest guy on the team, and if it made sense to Tim, then it was easy to sell to everybody else. And so it was no different with Kobe. You need to think of a game plan, offensively, defensively, whatever it is, that fit, that made sense. And if it did, and you felt it would with him, then it was easy to sell to the rest of the team. But his competitive spirit, his competitive nature was something that was unbelievable.
When we talk about that, we're talking about the guys I've coached and these guys have coached are like some of the greatest players that are they're Hall of Fame guys. We know that. So we've been fortunate there. But what makes these guys special, you listen to Scott talk about Durant and Westbrook or Kobe and LeBron or Chris or Blake, they're the hardest workers. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you're going to practice for 2 hours every day. You're going to get everything. And when your best players are able to lead, the rest of the stuff works out. And then you can manage all the other stuff as far as the game plans.
That was a tough question. You're asking about Chicago's management.
How do you manage that?
That's why I talked about alignment earlier. Remember that word I said alignment?
Well, there is.
Wait a minute, is Tibbs here?
Yeah, he is.
Tibbs, where's Tibbs? Tibbs here?
He just ran out.
He just ran out the door. I heard that.
Mike, you had I don't know if you guys agree with this, but a lot of coaches I've talked to said the aging superstar is almost impossible to coach. And you had them all on the same team one year. When you saw you had Nash, you have a bad back from Howard, you have Kobe, you have Gasol. Did you realize that you were in trouble that year, right, from training camp?
It's almost at zeros right here.
I know there's only 2 minutes left.
The best thing that happened is when we were doing our game plans against him, we just never knew who was playing, so it was almost impossible to game plan for him because he didn't know who was playing or not.
It's funny, you said the year, I think it wasn't quite the year, it was 5 games. Maybe 4 games. It is, I get a story too, and it doesn't involve those guys, but it's a good friend of mine now, Eric Snow. Eric Snow played, I don't know, 13, 14 years, maybe more, and you talk about a guy that, wouldn't fit in today's analytics because he can't shoot a 3. Not great shooting a layup, and definitely can't shoot a 2. So, a pull-up 2. So how does he fit in for 13, 14, 15 years? Well, he defends, he brings other things to the table. He's one of those glue guys that was able to lead because of who he was and what he was about. And I had him at the end of his career. When I first went to Cleveland, he was starting for me. And, this is a guy that played in the finals and had a lot of success. And I had to go to him and I had to tell him he wasn't going to start anymore. And, obviously he's a good guy, a stand-up guy, the whole 9 yards. That was hard for him. That was probably one of the hardest things that I had to do. And we had a little internal battle between the two of us where it was like this because he still felt like he can give me starters minutes and he felt like he deserved to be a starter. And, it's a tough situation, a delicate situation, but when it's time to move on, the biggest thing, in my opinion, is looking a guy in the eye and being honest with him. Right. And if he can't handle it, then so be it. But having said all that, after the initial shock of it, he was great, and it helped our team going forward.
Yeah, I mean, as you get older, you don't want to realize that you're slowing down, but that ball's right in front of you, and you just can't get to it anymore. And
Yeah, they
just,
Kobe this year.
you just can't get there for whatever reason. You just can't move that fast. But guys know I've had some great older players, Chauncey Billups and Grant Hill and stuff like that, and they're fantastic and leaders and stuff. But father time catches up to everybody. We've been fortunate to be in the basketball a long time, all of us.
Triple zeros. All right, that's it for the, what is this place called? Modern NBA coaching. I think that's it. We're done.
Yeah, we're done.